Mark Teixeira was traded twice in his career, and it changed baseball forever. While he was knocked off the Hall of Fame ballot in 2022, Teixeira was one of the best first basemen of the 21st century. Much of this success was in a Yankees uniform, but he actually played for 4 different teams, 2 of which were joined via trade. At the time, these were blockbuster deals, but no one could have anticipated how influential these trades would become. Real quick, I know I haven't made a butterfly effect or trade tree video in quite a while, but I want to make these types of videos more often. So if you have a butterfly effect or trade tree you want me to cover, leave it down in the comments. Okay, this story actually begins before Teixeira even stepped foot on a big league field, because in a way, he was already impacting the futures of MLB teams. Heading into the 2001 draft, third baseman Mark Teixeira was the draft's best college hitter, but not the best player. College pitcher Mark Pryor was the draft's consensus top player, but the #1 overall Minnesota Twins didn't love the idea of paying him a $12 million bonus, so they drafted the hometown high schooler Joe Mauer, who one GM said was a more talented prospect than Teixeira. While the selection of Pryor at #2 overall gave the Devil Rays a path to Teixeira at #3 overall, Scott Boras told them they'd prefer if Teixeira wasn't drafted by the Devil Rays given their dire financial situation. This meant the Phillies were in line to draft him at #4 overall. However, there was some history between the Phillies and Scott Boras. Back in 1997, the Phillies drafted J.D. Drew at #2 overall, but his signing bonus demand was $11 million. The Phillies offered $3 million with the opportunity for this number to increase once he made the majors, but Drew's agent, Scott Boras, said in 2018 that the Phillies never offered more than $3 million, and he never demanded more than $7.5 million. No matter what the truth actually is, this whole ordeal made the Phillies unable to sign their #2 overall pick, with the only compensation they received being the #42 overall pick the following year. So with Teixeira also wanting a record signing bonus, along with the disinterest in sharing a lineup with third baseman Scott Rowland, the Phillies passed on Teixeira and the Rangers selected him instead. Overall, I wonder if the Phillies would have taken a chance on Teixeira if the J.D. Drew fiasco never happened. After all, he was by far the best prospect on the board, and if they did convince Teixeira to sign and play first base, what happens to their 5th round selection, Ryan Howard? That's of course if they still select him. Lots of hypothetical questions, but what ultimately mattered was Teixeira was a Ranger. Less than 2 years after the draft, he made his big league debut in 2003. It was a solid rookie year, but 2004 was when Teixeira took it to the next level. Despite the trade of Alex Rodriguez ahead of the season, the 2004 Rangers won 89 games, with Teixeira providing elite production, especially for a second-year player. Unfortunately, the team didn't make the playoffs and continued on a downward spiral over the next few seasons. Simultaneously, Teixeira became just the 3rd player at the time to hit 100 doubles and 100 home runs in the first 3 years of a career. So, following in the footsteps of Pujols, an extension was in order for Teixeira heading into his 4th season. But Scott Boras gave the team an ultimatum: either buy out Teixeira's first 2 years of arbitration or give Teixeira a 10+ year extension. Now, if this is 2023, this proposal is likely taken more seriously. However, at the time, only 2 players had 10-year contracts: Derek Jeter and Alex Rodriguez, and A-Rod was traded by the Rangers only 3 years into that contract. In the end, Teixeira was given a 2-year contract that bought out his first 2 of 3 arbitration years. About a year and a half later, in mid-2007, the Rangers' situation had gotten worse, as they were well under 500 at the trade deadline, while having the 3rd worst ranked farm system according to Baseball America. With Teixeira 1.5 years away from free agency, the Rangers decided it was in the team's best interest to trade him. So, the day before the trade deadline, they traded Teixeira along with reliever Ron Mayhay to the Braves for a multitude of prospects, including 3 top 100 prospects, but we'll get to those players later. So, why did the Braves want Teixeira? Well, in 2006, they missed the postseason for the first time since 1990, and playoffs were considered a long shot for 2007. Nonetheless, by July 30th, the day before the trade deadline, they were only 2.5 games out of the wild card. Although they had only recently begun playing like a playoff caliber team, as a month earlier, on June 24th, the Braves sat at 500 following their 5th straight loss. Then, miraculously, between June 25th and July 29th, the Braves produced the 3rd best record in the National League. However, heading into the trade deadline, they started losing again. So, with the wild card in striking distance, their momentum diminishing, and the trade deadline just days away, the Braves caved in to the Rangers' demands after 3 weeks of negotiations and brought in the first baseman and cleanup hitter they desperately needed. Of course, now this begs the question, if the Braves never went on this hot streak, do they ever trade for Teixeira and start this trade tree? I'd venture to say probably not, and in that case, quite a few team histories would be altered. Regardless, Teixeira would have been traded anyway because 1 year later, in July 2008, the Braves traded him to the team who finished runner-up in the bidding 1 year earlier. The Angels. Wait, so why did the Braves give up 3 top 100 prospects for Teixeira just to trade him 1 year later? Well, as great as Teixeira was with the Braves in 2007, they couldn't make the playoffs, and by the last week of July 2008, they were well under 500. So, with Teixeira set to be a free agent, the Braves decided to recoup some value before his inevitable departure. In return, the Braves received 2 players, with the main player being first baseman Casey Kotchman, who ended up playing only 130 games in a Braves uniform. Later on, he was traded to the Red Sox for first baseman Adam LaRoche, who was the player the Braves traded ahead of the 2007 season that led to them needing a first baseman in the first place. So this could have been all avoided if they just kept LaRoche, but I digress. The good news for Teixeira was he joined a great team. At the time of the trade, the Angels had the league's best record, but were in desperate need of offensive upgrades, which made Teixeira the perfect addition. Following the trade deadline, the Angels continued their run of success, ending the regular season with 100 wins. For the first time in his career, Teixeira was heading to the postseason. Of course, like he had his entire career, he performed incredibly well, but the Angels couldn't compete with the reigning champion Boston Red Sox. An incredibly disappointing conclusion to the Angels season. But they were set to remain in contention for the foreseeable future, especially if they could convince Teixeira to re-sign. Sure enough, they offered him an 8-year, $160 million contract. But that deal was eventually pulled off the table. Not too long after, Teixeira signed with the Yankees on an 8-year, $180 million contract. With this signing, the Yankees had created an offensive juggernaut. In 2009, not only did this team win 103 games, they went on to win the World Series, giving Teixeira his long-awaited championship ring. Now, even though Teixeira nearly won the American League MVP, he actually didn't perform that well in the playoffs. But he did make some history.
Driven down the left field line. And it is gone!
Only 11 Yankees have hit a postseason walk-off home run, and Teixeira is one of them. To be fair, this wasn't Teixeira's only important hit of this playoff run, as he hit a game-tying home run in Game 2 of the World Series. Although, it's interesting that neither of his noteworthy hits from this postseason occurred in the ALCS against the Angels. Ultimately, it didn't matter because the Angels lost the series, but over time, the Angels got the best player out of this situation. In the 2009 draft, the Angels received the number 25 pick as compensation for losing Teixeira, and the player they selected ended up being a bit better than Teixeira. Yep, That pick turned into Mike Trout. Now, to be fair, the Angels had the 24th pick too, which was compensation for the loss of Francisco Rodriguez. This pick was used to select Randal Grichuk, but apparently the Angels only picked Grichuk ahead of Trout for monetary reasons. In terms of talent, Trout was always ranked above Grichuk in the eyes of the Angels front office. So while the departure of Teixeira has a direct link to the selection of Trout and at the very least ensured they'd select Trout, it's likely they would have had the chance to select him anyway. Also, the Angels received a second pick as compensation for Teixeira. With this pick, they selected high school pitcher Tyler Skaggs, who became a top 25 prospect after he was traded to the Diamondbacks, but he eventually found his way back to the Angels a few years later. Over time, he turned into a solid strikeout pitcher. But tragically, he wasn't given the chance to fully live up to his potential, as on July 1st, 2019, he was found dead in his hotel room. He was 27 years old. Rest in peace, Tyler Skaggs. So, in 2010, Mike Trout was turning into a superstar prospect, and Teixeira was a key component of a Yankees team looking to win back-to-back championships. However, their quest for another championship was halted by the new team on the block, a team from Teixeira's past.
The Texas Rangers are American League champions.
The Rangers beat the Yankees in the 2010 ALCS as they sought to win their first championship. So what does this have to do with Teixeira? Well, let's go back to the 2007 trade. The Rangers received 5 players in this deal, 3 of whom were top 100 prospects: catcher Jared Saltalamacchia, shortstop Elvis Andrus, and starter Matt Harrison. Not only did Andrus and Harrison become all-stars, the Rangers also received future all-star reliever Neftali Feliz. While the Rangers couldn't win the World Series, these 3 were key contributors for not only 2 championship caliber teams, but for the years to follow as well. In particular, Elvis Andrus played over a decade with the Rangers, accumulating over 30 F-WAR. Plus, the trade of Andrus to the A's in 2020 worked out well for the Rangers as they received a rookie catcher by the name of Jonah Heim, who's now a key member of the team. Overall, this 2-decade-long trade tree is one of the most interesting cases of a butterfly effect in recent MLB history. Plus, there's a lot of what-ifs to think about. Let's say we lived in a storybook world and the Rangers re-signed Teixeira. Not only would the current MLB landscape differ in some magnitude, there's the question of whether the Rangers still sign Adrian Beltre. Or, because the Braves never end up making that trade, what happens to the prospects involved? Or, let's say the Angels end up re-signing Teixeira. What happens to Albert Pujols in free agency? Where does he end up signing? So many possible scenarios. But remember, those are just scenarios. As for the trades I talked about today, not many trades get to influence as many teams and players as these ones did. And to put it simply, that's what makes butterfly effects so interesting. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you did, subscribe to Start Raving Sports, check out my channel SportsStorm, and leave your butterfly effect or trade tree in the comments below. Thanks for watching.